Do customers value our work? Part one, a conversation with accounting professionals and QuickBooks consultant. So this is one of the most common questions I have from colleagues, which is, how do I raise my rates? How do I raise my fee? How do I get my client to pay me more than what they're paying me now? And I believe that's probably the wrong question to start with, although I believe it's a great question or a great couple of questions to ask. It is certainly the wrong question to start with. Let me give you a couple of examples. One of the typical things that we do is convert people from QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online. And we may see that as a transaction, as a one-time thing. We convert people from desktop to online, and that's it. And if we see it that way, if we see it as a single transaction, as one event, then we possibly have myopia in terms of understanding exactly what is it that the client could potentially value from an engagement like this. So whenever we're going to do a conversion from desktop to online, we go through a specific set of process that we do from start to finish in order to provide the service at the end. First, we have an in-depth value conversation. We understand why. Why do you want to upgrade to QuickBooks Online? And that's an open-ended question. And we want to have a deep understanding on what are the needs by it. Is it just because it sounds cool? Is it because it's the trend? Is it because they're expanding and they have someone in a different city and the word online clicked? I mean, there's many reasons why. So you want to discover that. The other piece that we do is we do a needs analysis. We go inside of their QuickBooks Desktop file and we understand, what does it look like? What does their current accounting look like? Is it accurate? Is it messy? Doing the conversion with messy data, what they say, garbage in, garbage out, is probably going to render the opposite of what we really want to achieve out of this. So we need to understand what the inputs look like before we even talk about the outputs. Then we give them some options. I give the client options. I say, look, what would happen if you don't convert? What happens if you do convert? Are there options to keep you on QuickBooks Desktop? Not that I'm anchored in it. I don't need to keep them in desktop. I just want to give people options. I believe one of the very valuable part of being a consultant, an advisor, an accountant is not to tell the client there's one way to do it and that's it. Is to give the client options. And those options are really valuable because those options come full of experience and full of what ifs, right? And then the client can actually evaluate that on their own. Then we go in and we do actual cleanup work. We clean up their QuickBooks Desktop file. We finish data, complete data, adjust the tax returns, whatever it happens to be, to make sure that the conversion converts smoothly. Even so, maybe we don't even change the accounting, but we have to change the structure of certain transactions in order to make sure that the conversion goes through. And there's a lot of experience that goes behind doing that part. Then after we make the conversion, we do adjustments, right, to make sure that the QuickBooks Online file looks the same as QuickBooks Desktop. Then we go to the actual cleanup to get rid of things that they don't need. In some cases, we have to make adjustments to make it match or adjust the look and feel of certain transactions and templates to make it match. Then possibly we have to integrate with a third-party app, which could be a lot of work. Develop workarounds and changes in the workflow. If you decide not to go with an app, or even if you go with an app, there's going to be changes in workflow because you're changing systems. Then actually helping the client choose the right app for their operations if the conversion of QuickBooks Online actually reduced features for the client, which is actually a very common thing. Then we want to show them the results. What does it look like after conversion? Show them the financial statements, show them the reports, right? Because that's what the client's going to look at and say, okay, it looks like the conversion went smoothly or was complete. Then we provide some training and support for the client post-conversion and their team to make sure everybody's on the same page. And then lastly, we leave the client confident that they can take over from now on. So it's a pretty lengthy process to do a conversion. And when you actually break it down that way, you start seeing, just as a service provider, you see the value you provide during this work, not looking at this as a single transaction. And you also want to bring the client into the process and explain that that's the process you go through, so the client can also, in their mind, have a frame around what is the possible value you can bring with a single simple transaction like converting from desktop to QuickBooks Online. But one of the coolest things about this, and it's one of the things that took me a very long time to understand, is that value has a U-curve or the smile curve. What happens is most projects have the most value at the very beginning and at the end. Okay, so all these tasks that I mentioned, they're going to be declining from start to end. They're going to be declining, and towards the middle, they're going to absolutely have no value for the client. And then towards the end, they're going to have value again. In other words, when we figure out what the client wants and why they want it, and we provide a solution and a visualization of what it will look like, and then at the end, when we deliver the final product, those are the 2 points that the client values the most. Everything else in between, which is really the meat and potatoes and the amount of work that goes through it, is the biggest, the client does not value. So there's an inverse effect in terms of effort and value. The easiest things, which is to have a conversation with the client at the beginning and then deliver the final result, the report, whatever happens to be, to the client, the two easiest things in terms of effort are invariably the most valuable things for the client. And the hardest things like data entry, data crunching, reconciling, conversion, integration, all the complicated parts, the client does not value at all. So when I understood the smile curve, I actually have an inverse effect on the way I look at engagements now. I look at my first interaction and my last one as the two most valuable pieces. And everything else in between, I pretty much see it's got low value or no value. So the low value part is my problem. The high value part is the client's problem. So if I can't get the client to see the value on the first engagement, on the first meeting, if I can't figure out how to present what my work is worth or what the work is worth, everything else will be impossible for you to prove value. Unless somehow you gamble and wait until the very end to see if you can, in fact, deliver some value. So that's the first example. The second example is, let's say, for example, someone comes to me and says, fix my inventory issues. Actually, it's very common. I do this all the time. It's one of the most common engagements that I do is fix someone's QuickBooks files inventory issues. And that's what they come with. Hey, fix my inventory. Okay, so I can do two things. One, I can say, sure, give me the QuickBooks file and I can quote unquote fix the inventory and move on. And it could be just one transaction. But I take a different approach. First thing what I do is I exercise one of the most powerful things I've learned in the past couple of years, which is the power of why, asking why, truly asking why, but asking 5 times. Now that number is not set in stone, doesn't have to be 5 times. Sometimes you get to the right answer on the first or the second, but it is common practice that if you actually ask why a couple of times, you may get to the bottom of it. So let me do the example. So the client says, help me fix my inventory issues. Well, I can start with the first why. Why? The client will say, well, because I need the reports of my quantity on hand to match my reality. Okay, that's a good answer. I could stop there and say, okay, I'll fix it for you. But then I can ask why one more time. Why? Why is it important for the inventory to match the quantity on hand? Well, maybe they may come back and answer, because I need my financial statements to reflect my correct inventory asset and cost of goods sold. That's a great answer. And we may say, great, it looks like you know what you're doing and you're right, I should fix your inventory. But let's dig deeper. Why? Why is it important for those numbers to be accurate? Okay? Well, your customer may say, because without this, I don't know my margins. Well, I think it's important to know your margins, but why? What would knowing your margins help you with? Well, without my margins, I cannot pay my employees the correct commissions. So now we're getting deeper into the real reason why, right? I mean, you want to pay someone a commission. Why? Why is it important to pay somebody the right commission? And then they may come back and say, well, I lost my two best salespeople last month, and I have a feeling it was because it took me too long to correct their commissions, or I gave them the correct commission amount. So you ask why enough times, so now you can ask the right question, which is, what is the value of you paying the correct commissions and keeping your top salespeople and staff? So we went from fix my inventory issues to what is the value of paying my top employees the correct commission amount. So when you ask that question and you get to the bottom of that question, then you can talk about pricing. Then you can talk about what your work is worth. Example number 3, let's talk about discussing quality expectations. It's one of the things that took me a long time to start doing, which is to talk to the client about quality. What are your quality expectations? What does quality mean to you? I think we use the word quality way too loosely. Almost everyone that I know is, yes, I deliver high quality services. Quality is one of the most subjective words out there. Okay? When you think of Walmart, I don't think a lot of people think about quality, right? I would say so. And I welcome to write comments in Facebook here if you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube. Do you think of Walmart as quality? Does anyone here think of Walmart as quality? Well, you know what? People from other countries come here and go to Walmart, and they just think it's amazing and incredible, the quality of the store. You know, because in their home country, they may not have as much stock, service, capacity to return stuff. So quality is extremely subjective. So if you don't have a discussion about quality, what is your expectation of quality? It's difficult to have a discussion about value. And it's even harder to have a discussion about price. So this is something that is taught in a lot of project management books. And I got this from a friend of mine by the name of Ed Kless, who mentions this quite a few times in his podcast, that says the quality or the quality of output can be maximized when this triangle is fully harmonious, or when all the sides are even. There are 3 sides to the quality triangle, or to the project's triangle. We have the price or the cost, we have the scope, and we have the timing. At any point in time that your client wants to pay less, right? You're probably going to be able to get the same quality if you have to be able to extend the time, give you more time to do it, or maybe reduce the scope or increase the scope. In other words, there needs to be harmony on the scope of the work, the amount of details that they want, right? The amount of reports, the amount of output they want to get from our work, the timing, how quick they want it, or how much time they give us to complete. There's a lot of projects that I would charge a lot less for if they give me 6 months to complete or a year to complete. Why? Because I can do it in my spare time. I can do it in my idle time. That's the best way to optimize and be efficient at our work, right? We take a big project, but they give us a year to complete it. And then I can price it way low. But customers don't want that. I don't have any customers that are okay with me delivering whatever I'm going to deliver in 6 months or a year. Everybody wants everything by yesterday. So if you're going to put time constraints, right, you better reduce the scope or increase the price. Otherwise, having this triangle not be even is going to reduce the potential quality of your output. So it's a real awesome visual representation of how scope, price, and time need to be harmonious. And you set this expectation with your customers so they know if they ask for something that is a scope increase, they have to give you more time and pay more in order to do this harmoniously or not to affect the quality. Every time we do things in a hurry, what happens? You get less quality out of it. Every time that we buy a product that's cheap, what happens? We get less quality out of it. Right? Every time that we get something that has less features, we potentially over time, that's a scope, over time, we get less output out of it. Right? So you have to make sure that if your client is going to increase the scope, that they also know that needs to come with an increase in time or price. Otherwise, the potential quality of output goes down. Example number 4, understanding your role. And I think this is a very powerful tool of a conversation to have with a client the first time you meet them, or a potential customer the first time you meet them. One is, what is the role you want me to have on this project? What is the role that you want me to have with you as your accountant. Do you need me to be a pair of hands? Okay, a pair of hands mindlessly follows the client's instructions, regardless of whether it makes sense or not. Matter of fact, the whole concept of it making sense doesn't matter, right? That's what most employees do when the bosses tell them to do something, right? Or do you want me to be a collaborator? You want to partner with me, define the problem, and create and implement solutions together? Or do you want me to be an expert? You want me to come in like the SWAT team, clean things up, and get out, right? Just do something, come in, clean it up, get out. Your client needs to tell you what that role needs to be. Now, I'm obsessed with triangles, so we will show this in terms of triangles. So the best visual representation to me would be, so when you say you got the three things, right? You got a pair of hands, you got expert, and you got collaborator. So you define the three: expert, pair of hands, and collaborator, and you draw it in a triangle. And then you tell your client, look, instead of just giving me a straightforward answer, just tell me exactly where I want to be, just draw a dot or a circle on where do you think that should be. So instead of having someone pick one out of three, just say draw it. Like, does it feel more like a pair of hands or a collaborator, expert? After you explain it, draw it. And then say, for example, they draw the dot or the circle and they say, here, this is the role that I want you to be at. And there's so much context, you know, when your client tells you the role they want you to have, that from there you can have a conversation. From there you can say, okay, as an expert, that's going to be a little bit of a pair of hands and a little bit of a collaborator. What is this engagement going to look like, and what is my involvement going to look like? Now, in some cases, you may have a client select right in between pair of hands and expert, or right in between pair of hands and collaborator, and right in between expert and collaborator. And if they choose that, then you must understand that the underlying theme is, look, if I want you to be a pair of hands and an expert, I just want you to come in, solve my problem, and leave. If I want you to help me do it, I mean, if I want you to be between a pair of hands and a collaborator, then what I'm asking you is to help me do it. Help me do it. Do it with me. Right? Let's pair up and let's spend the weekend together and let's fix it. If they're asking you to be between an expert and a collaborator, then what they're asking you is to transfer the knowledge to them. Help them, coach them through the process. So once you know what they want you to be or what your role needs to be, there's so much context around what the actual service that you're going to deliver is going to be. Example number 5, visualizing the optimal future. Okay, this is when we think of the famous end in mind that Stephen Covey has in one of the 7 habits of highly effective people, right? End in mind, begin with end in mind, visualizing the future. So when you're meeting with a client for the first time, you can ask, what can we do for you? That's a common question. People ask that all the time. Sounds like a great question to ask. It's service driven, right? But instead of asking, what can we do for you? Try to take a step back and ask a question that really requires them to think. The best question that I found is the Dan Sullivan question. And the question says, if we were having coffee 3 years from now and you were extremely happy with our progress, what would have had to happen in order for you to be so happy? So it requires someone to think about the future and visualize and then paint the picture of, well, in 3 years, I would have to have access to all the reports that I need, these 7 reports with 1 click. In 3 years, I want to be more profitable. In 3 years, I want to have a full-time accountant on staff that you train and you supervise. In 3 years, I want to be paid up to my taxes. In 3 years, I want to understand my margins and my inventory, right? So when the client can visualize, right, 3 years, which is not a dream, it's 3 years is very feasible. When they can visualize 3 years from now, they can actually tell you exactly what your role is going to be. And I think that every engagement should at least feel that's going to be at least 3 years old. Like I don't walk with it into any client thinking that I'm in and out and never going to see them again. I'm thinking and hoping that at least I will have to, because transformation is not overnight. Transformation takes years. So I love that 3-year question. I think is a perfect question to ask, and it helps you visualize the future. And finally, to wrap things up, pricing for value. So first thing is we need to establish value, right? That's our first job. We need to establish value. And the first way to understand value is to understand that our customers do not care about the work and effort we put into our work. Customers do not care about the work and effort we put into our work. They only care about the value they can get out of it. Customers are not price sensitive. I'm a customer. You're a customer, whoever's watching this. We buy stuff all the time. We buy things that are $1. We buy things that are $10. We buy things that are $100,000, right? Like a house or more. We buy things on all different price tags. We're not price sensitive. We're value sensitive. We buy them at different price tags because they give us more value than what we pay for. Therefore, it is normal, it's natural, it is expected for people to be value sensitive. So when I talk to folks that say, oh no, my customers are you don't understand, Hector, my customers are price sensitive. No, they're not price sensitive, they're value sensitive. And I think that that's a mind shift change that needs to happen. It's a mindset that needs to happen. So I think it is impossible to truly price your work without understanding the value that the customer delivers from it. Now, that's different than the value that your work represents. A lot of folks think that because their work is high quality, therefore it's high value. Well, maybe it's high value to you as the creator of it, but the only one that's the judge, the ultimate judge of value is the person paying for it, is the customer. If the customer can't deliver value from something that you think is valuable, then you have no business doing business with each other, because you definitely don't understand each other. So you cannot price your work unless you understand, or until you understand, the value the client derives from it. Now let's talk about prices versus cost. A price without a value is a cost. It's an expense. Anytime that somebody throws prices out there and there's no value contextually attached to it, it's just cost. It just sounds like somebody's taking money out of my wallet. Think about it. If you're talking to someone and you haven't had any conversation and they tell you it's $100, well, it already sounds like they're trying to get money from me. Right? But when you have a conversation about value up front and you understand the value up front, then price is contextual. Then it could be a cost if you get less value out of it than what you're paying for. Or it may not, right? So think about it. Price without value is just a cost. A provider of services that costs your clients money, it's a vendor. So you have to choose. Do you want to be a provider that just costs your clients money? It's one more thing I have to pay. A provider of value to your clients is a partner. And money paid to a partner, it's always an investment, not a cost. When your clients pay you, they need to feel, that's a key word, operative word, they need to feel they're investing in long-term value, not spending in short-term costs. Time. Customers do not buy your time. They don't want to buy your time. No one wants to buy somebody else's time, because time is not transferable. Time has no value. But what customers want is they want to buy their own time. They want to buy their freedom. People always want to buy their freedom. Almost everything that we spend money on is representative to our freedom. When we buy something that we want, a luxury, a digital camera, a computer, a toy, it is representative of my freedom to choose to do with my money whatever I want. People buy freedom, or what people buy represents how they feel about their freedom. When people don't have a lot of money to spend, they don't spend it. right? They don't buy stuff. And they may not feel free. So your customers will have freedom when you give it to them. You give your clients peace of mind so they don't have to worry about compliance stuff. That gives them freedom. You give your clients control, the reports that they need to feel that they understand their business, understand where they're going. That's freedom. You give your clients time back so they can focus on what they want, on what they love, on the reasons why they started their business. You give clients time for them. That's freedom. That's what people want to buy. That's what you can provide. So you must become a value provider. And when you become a value provider, your customers will pay you what you're worth to them. That's it. Thank you very much.